This short piece is about 10 minutes. It's not really a video, more a reading. It's a reading from the war diary of the 11th Battalion Cheshire Regiment over 3 days, from the 1st of July to the 3rd of July 1916. It was the start of the Battle of the Somme, although for the 11th Battalion the fighting didn't begin until the early morning of the 3rd of July. I downloaded the war diary from the National Archives. It's been scanned from a diary written in pencil. I'll apologise in advance for two things. First, I'm not an actor or voiceover, and it's difficult reading someone's handwriting. And second, the photographs are just examples. They aren't necessarily of the 11th Battalion, and because I'm no military expert, I may have used some photographs of American or Canadian soldiers by mistake, but I use them just to give you something relevant to look at while listening to the war diary. I read it because I wanted to find out what happened to my great-uncle, 20-year-old George Agnew. He was from Birkenhead and had worked at Lever Brothers at Port Sunlight. He was wounded on the 2nd of July and died in hospital at Thiepval on the 10th of July. From reading this diary, I think he was one of the 3 men wounded when fitting detonators to hand grenades. These are the only casualties mentioned in the diary for the 2nd of July. So poor George missed the attack by his comrades at 6:20 in the morning of the following day. Listen for the next few minutes and you can find out what happened to them. On the night of June 30th, July 1st, the battalion marched from Toutencourt to Hedoville, a distance of about 9 miles, getting into quarters at about 1:30 a.m. and settling down into huts and tents. At 9:30 a.m. a memorandum was received from the GOC to the effect that the offensive operations in a larger scale, to which end the recent training has been directed, were to commence this day. All kits were stored in the village, and the battalion was held in readiness to move at an hour's notice. During the night of July 1st, 2nd, orders were received for the battalion at about 11:30 p.m. to hold itself in immediate readiness to move forward to Avaloy Wood, but at 4:30 a.m. the normal state of readiness was resumed. At 9:30 a.m. on the morning of the 2nd, orders were received for the battalion to move with the remainder of the brigade at 9:45 a.m. to Martinsart Wood. The move was accomplished without difficulty. Lieutenant Colonel R.L. Aspinall, DSO, being in command of the brigade on the march, the Brigadier General having proceeded to Thiepval for a reconnaissance of the trenches there. The battalion bivouacked along the side in Martinsart Wood from WHD 23 to W4D 80, and one officer for the company was sent to report to the headquarters of the battalion occupying the British trenches in R31A and R31G. The CO of the battalion was not with the battalion, but at the brigade headquarters, temporarily situated at about W2D 94. The battalion remained at its bivouac for the remainder of the day, unaware of why it was there or of any other fate that was to befall it. The officers who'd proceeded to the trenches returned, reporting to the adjutant that no guides had met them, as brigade had said was arranged, and that the battalion in the trenches was unable to give them any information whatever as to the cause of their visit or otherwise. The trip or journey of the 4 company officers was therefore fruitless. At about 5 p.m. an order was received from 75 Brigade headquarters to issue each man in the battalion with 2 Mills bombs and to issue all picks and shovels that could possibly be carried by men if the battalion was ordered to move to the attack. This order was carried out, and each man, in addition, in accordance with the order, was made to carry an extra 50 rounds of small arms ammunition. During the detonation of the bombs before issue, an accident happened, which resulted in the wounding of 3 men. About 9:30 p.m, all adjutants of the brigade were summoned to the temporary brigade headquarters, where, at the dictation of the brigade major, some very hasty notes were made. These notes were to the effect that the 75th Brigade were to attack a section of hostile trenches just south of Thiepval. The 11th Cheshires were to be on the right, the 2nd South Lancs Regiment on the left, 8th Border Regiment in the centre, with the 8th South Lancs Regiment in Brigade Reserve. The boundaries of the attack were very vaguely stated, and the time of the attack was not issued. Orders were to be sent to units later. Meanwhile, units were to proceed at once to their assembly positions in the British trenches and await orders. The CO rejoined the battalion at about 11 p.m. and hastily detailed to OC companies the few notes he had gleaned at brigade headquarters during the day. The attack was to be carried out in depth, the battalion attacking in 8 waves: D Company on the left, A Company on the right, C Company in support of D and A companies, with B Company held in battalion reserve. The battalion was fallen in and marched via Black Horse Bridge to the British trenches in R31 AVC. Guides of the 15th HLI met companies after some considerable delay at Black Horse Bridge and conducted them to the British trenches. At Black Horse Bridge, the battalion was delayed an hour owing to the great number of wounded being brought down the communication trenches. The folly of evacuating wounded by the same trenches as are used by troops was exceedingly well illustrated. It was a common thing for a platoon to proceed a mile along a communication trench and then have to about turn and retrace its steps to allow the wounded to be got out. Thirdly, it increased the number of casualties from shell fire, as the enemy never ceased to shell the trenches while this congestion existed. On immediately visiting the companies, the adjutant found that a considerable number of casualties had occurred during entrance to the assembly positions, that the British trenches were devoid of British troops, and that the guides had no instructions other than to lead the companies to some particular spot in the trenches. How much of the trenches each company was to occupy was left to the imagination. No further relief of troops, in fact, had taken place. By about 5:30 a.m, the companies had more or less taken up some portion of the trenches and got in touch with one another. The trenches were exceedingly badly knocked about, affording little cover from fire, and in a great many places little cover from view. Steps were taken to organise the bombers and to ascertain where the dumps were, to ensure a supply of bombs and small arms ammunition to the companies. At about 6:20 a.m, the Border Regiment on the left of the battalion, with whom touch had been made, attacked the German positions, but by whose orders it is not known. The right flank of the borders being exposed, the leading companies of the Cheshire Regiment immediately attacked, and the assaulting waves passed over no man's land in perfect order. Word to this effect was immediately sent to the commanding officer, who at once proceeded to the scene of action. The assaulting troops very soon came under a withering fire from machine guns, which made the ground at about 50 yards from the first German line absolutely impassable. Line after line of the troops were mown down. The commanding officer who went with the reserve company was unfortunately killed, and Captain Hill, the adjutant, on whom the command of the battalion devolved, decided to get the men still living back into the trench from which they jumped off, and to hold it as a defensive line. The remainder of the day was spent in trench warfare and carrying in of wounded and other casualties. Unfortunately, the list of casualties was large and included every company commander. 20 officers and 657 other ranks entered the trenches on the 3rd, and of this number, 6 officers and 350 other ranks came out on the night of the 4th inst.